Of all the mountains on Earth, none have cast a longer shadow across human history than Sinai. When you hear that name, what comes to mind? For most, it's a single, iconic image, a towering, bearded patriarch, his face stern, holding 2 tablets of stone etched with the 10 Commandments. We see it as the birthplace of law, the foundation of morality. But if that's all you see, you are looking at a single grain of sand on a vast desert shore. The truth of what happened in that desolate wilderness is infinitely more terrifying, more glorious, and more transformative than a simple list of rules. This wasn't merely the giving of a law, it was the forging of a nation. It was the moment God, the unseeable, untouchable creator of the cosmos, descended in fire and fury to meet with a broken, traumatized people. It was a wedding ceremony between heaven and earth, a covenant sealed in blood and thunder. And, like any great story of love and covenant, it is also a story of breathtaking betrayal and unimaginable grace. Stay with me, because today we journey back to that trembling mountain. We will stand with the children of Israel at its base, feel the ground shake beneath our feet, and hear the trumpet of God that made even a mountain quake in fear. You are about to discover that the story of Sinai is not just about the law that was given, but about the heart of the lawgiver that was revealed. It's a story that exposes the deepest flaw in humanity and reveals God's ultimate solution, a solution that would not be fully realized until another man on another mountain fulfilled everything that Sinai demanded. Let's go back to the beginning. To understand the miracle of Sinai, you must first understand the people who arrived there. They were not a nation, they were a mob, a massive, disorganized and deeply wounded collection of human beings who had known nothing but 400 years of brutal slavery. For generations, their identity had been forged in the crucible of Egypt, the most powerful empire on earth. Their days were measured by the crack of a whip, their worth calculated by the number of bricks they could make under a scorching sun. They were told what to do, when to wake, when to eat, and when to sleep. Their gods were the gods of their masters, powerful, visible idols of stone and gold, representing the sun, the river, and the beasts of the field. The God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was a distant, whispered memory. Then he acted. Through Moses, a man raised in Pharaoh's court but marked by the heritage of his people, God unleashed a series of catastrophic judgments upon Egypt. The plagues were not random acts of destruction, they were a systematic dismantling of the Egyptian pantheon. God turned the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt and a deity itself, into blood. He blotted out the sun, the domain of their chief god, Ra. With each plague, he declared, "I am the Lord," demonstrating that the forces of nature and the fate of empires were held in his hand alone. The final plague, the death of the firstborn, was the breaking point. It was a terrifying night where the only safety was found behind doors, marked with the blood of a lamb, a stark and prophetic foreshadowing of a future, ultimate sacrifice. With the wealth of Egypt in their hands and the wails of their former masters behind them, they fled. But freedom was not a peaceful stroll into a new life. It was a desperate, panicked race into the unknown, with the most formidable army on the planet thundering at their heels. Trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's chariots, their newfound freedom seemed destined to be a short-lived, tragic footnote in history. Their old mindset immediately returned. They cried out to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" It was the cry of a people who knew how to be slaves but had no idea how to be free. And then, the impossible happened. God parted the sea. They walked through on dry ground, walls of water towering on either side of them, a pathway to life carved through the very heart of chaos. As they reached the other side, the waters crashed down, annihilating the entire Egyptian army. In a single cataclysmic act of salvation, the power that had enslaved them for 4 centuries was broken, drowned in the depths of the sea. They were finally, truly free. They sang, they danced, They celebrated, but the euphoria of deliverance is a fleeting thing. The reality of the wilderness was about to set in. 3 months they journeyed through the vast, silent, and unforgiving desert of sin. This was no lush paradise. It was a landscape of rock, sand, and relentless sun. The water ran out, the food was gone, and once again the slave mentality surfaced. They grumbled, they complained, they romanticized their bondage. "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt," they cried. "There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Their memory of whips and bricks had already been replaced by a fantasy of full bellies. Yet, God was patient. He was not just testing them, He was teaching them a new way to live. He was weaning them off the self-reliance of slavery and teaching them the daily dependence of faith. When they cried for water, He provided it supernaturally from a rock. When they cried for food, He rained down manna from heaven, a mysterious, wafer-like bread that appeared with the morning dew. But it came with a condition: they could only gather enough for 1 day. To gather more was an act of distrust, and it would rot. They had to learn, day by agonizing day, to trust that God would provide for them tomorrow, just as He had today. This was the first lesson of freedom. It requires faith. Their final test before the mountain came in the form of an enemy. The Amalekites, a fierce nomadic tribe, attacked them without provocation. Israel was not a fighting force. They were refugees. Moses, understanding that this battle would be won not by military strategy but by divine intervention, went to the top of a hill. As long as he held his hands up, holding the staff of God, Israel prevailed. When his arms grew tired and fell, the Amalekites gained the upper hand. So Aaron and Hur came, one on each side, and held up Moses' arms until sunset. Israel won a decisive victory. The lesson was seared into their national consciousness. Their strength came not from themselves, but from their connection to God. Their victory depended entirely on the one who mediated between them and heaven. Finally, after this arduous journey of deliverance and education, they arrived. Before them loomed a mountain, not a beautiful, verdant peak, but a jagged, imposing mass of granite rising from the desert floor, Mount Sinai. It was here, in this place of stark and desolate beauty, that the God who had delivered them would now define them. He had saved them from Egypt, now He would save them from themselves. He had brought them out of bondage, now He would invite them into covenant. The voice of God came to Moses with a message for the people, a breathtaking proposal. "You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Let the weight of those words sink in. This was not a proposition made to a powerful, worthy nation. It was made to a weary, grumbling, inconsistent group of ex-slaves. He didn't say, "Clean yourselves up, become worthy, and then I will choose you." He said, "I have already chosen you. I carried you on eagle's wings. I brought you to myself. Now, will you walk with me?" He was offering them an identity they had never dreamed of, a treasured possession, a kingdom of priests, meaning every single one of them would have the role of representing God to the world. A holy nation, a people set apart, different from every other nation on earth, living in a way that reflected the very character of the God who had saved them. The people, moved by the grandeur of this offer, responded in unison, "We will do everything the Lord has said." They had no idea what that would truly cost. The preparations for the encounter began. This would not be a casual meeting. God commanded Moses to consecrate the people. For 3 days, they were to prepare themselves. They had to wash their clothes and abstain from marital relations. A boundary was set up around the base of the mountain, a line they were forbidden to cross. The penalty for even touching the mountain, whether for man or beast, was instant death. Why such severity? because God was teaching them the most crucial lesson of all, the concept of holiness. He is utterly different, pure, perfect, and separate from all that is created. To approach a holy God is not like approaching a human king. It is to come into contact with a power so pure and absolute that anything unholy is consumed in its presence. The washing and abstinence were not magic rituals. They were external acts, designed to impress upon their hearts an internal reality. They were unclean, and he was holy. To meet him required preparation, reverence, and a healthy dose of fear. On the morning of the third day, it began. A thick cloud, dense and dark, descended upon the mountain, completely shrouding it from view. From the heart of the cloud came thunder that was not merely a sound, but a physical concussion, a booming that vibrated in their very bones. Flashes of lightning tore through the darkness, illuminating the terrifying scene. The entire mountain was engulfed in smoke, as if it were a colossal furnace, because the Lord had descended upon it in fire. And the ground itself, the very bedrock of the desert, began to violently shake. Then came a sound unlike any other, a sound that would be etched into their collective memory forever. The piercing, otherworldly blast of a shofar, a ram's horn. But this was no human horn. It grew louder and louder and louder, until it was a deafening, continuous blast that seemed to emanate from the heavens themselves. The people in the camp trembled. This was not the gentle whisper of a benevolent deity. This was the raw, untamed, and terrifying power of the Creator. Their response was not awestruck wonder, it was primal fear. They were in the presence of the infinite, and they felt their finitude, their fragility, their sinfulness, down to the marrow of their bones. In the midst of this terrifying symphony of power, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. Then God called Moses to the top of the mountain, into the very heart of the fire and the cloud. He alone could cross the boundary. He alone could act as the mediator between this terrifyingly holy God and this terrified, unholy people. From the heart of the storm, God spoke the 10 Commandments. We often see these as the 10 suggestions, or a simple moral code. They are infinitely more. They are the terms of the covenant, the foundational pillars of the relationship he was establishing. And they did not begin with a command, but with a declaration of love and salvation. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. This is the context for everything that follows. The laws are not a means to earn God's favor. They are the response to the favor he has already shown. He is not saying, obey these rules and I will rescue you. He is saying, because I have rescued you, this is how you are to live as my people. The first 4 commandments define their vertical relationship with him. You shall have no other gods before me. This was a radical command in a polytheistic world. It demanded exclusive loyalty, a singular devotion. After witnessing his power over all the gods of Egypt, anything less would be absurdity. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. This was even more radical. Their God was not to be reduced to an object of wood, stone, or gold. He is spirit, invisible, transcendent. They were not to worship the creation, but the Creator. To make an image of God is to attempt to control him, to shrink him down to a manageable size, and the God of Sinai would not be managed. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. This is not just about cursing, it's about bearing his name. As his chosen people, they represented him on earth. To live unjustly or hypocritically was to bear his name falsely, to misrepresent his character to the world. And remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. This was a revolutionary concept. In a world where human value was based on productivity, God commanded rest. The Sabbath was a weekly declaration of trust, an acknowledgement that their provision and security came not from their own endless labor, but from him. It was a gift of grace woven into the fabric of time itself. The remaining 6 commandments defined their horizontal relationships with each other, creating the blueprint for a just and compassionate society. Honor your father and your mother. This was the bedrock of social order, ensuring the stability of the family and the transmission of wisdom and faith across generations. You shall not murder. This established the sacredness of human life, created in the image of God. You shall not commit adultery. This protected the sanctity of the marriage covenant, the foundational building block of the nation. You shall not steal. This protected the right to property and the fruits of one's labor. You shall not bear false witness. This upheld the necessity of truth for justice and community to function. And finally, the 10th commandment, the one that pierces the heart, you shall not covet. Here, God went beyond mere actions and legislated against the sinful desire behind the actions. He was not just interested in behavior modification, he was concerned with the transformation of the heart. This final commandment revealed a profound truth. The problem wasn't just what they did, but what they wanted. And it was a standard no one could perfectly keep. When the people heard the voice of God and saw the terrifying display of his power, they drew back in fear. They said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." They understood. They could not stand in the presence of such holiness. They needed a mediator. They needed someone to stand in the gap for them. And so, Moses became the archetype of the mediator, drawing near to the thick darkness where God was, receiving not only the 10 commandments, but the rest of the law, the detailed instructions that would govern their new society. This book of the covenant, recorded in Exodus chapters 21 through 23, was a detailed social and civil code. It included laws on slavery that, while foreign to us, were radically humane for their time, treating slaves as persons with rights, not mere property. It laid out principles of justice, demanding fairness for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. It established restitution for wrongdoing and responsibility for one's actions. It set up a calendar of feasts and festivals that would orient their entire year around the worship and remembrance of God. This was not just a religion. It was a comprehensive design for a nation unlike any other, a society founded on justice, compassion, and the worship of the one true God. When Moses came down and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice, "Everything the Lord has said, we will do." To formalize this promise, Moses built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars, one for each tribe of Israel. He sealed the covenant with blood. He sacrificed young bulls, and he took half the blood and sprinkled it on the altar, symbolizing God's side of the covenant. Then, he read the book of the covenant to the people. Again, they affirmed their promise. "We will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey." Then Moses took the other half of the blood and sprinkled it on the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you." It was a solemn, binding oath. A blood covenant was the most serious agreement one could make, signifying that breaking it was a matter of life and death. The nation of Israel was now officially married to Yahweh, their God and King. With the covenant sealed, Moses was called back up the mountain, this time to receive the stone tablets written by the very finger of God. He would be gone for 40 days and 40 nights. Down below, at the foot of the mountain, still shrouded in God's glorious presence, the people waited. One day passed, then a week, then weeks turned into a month. Their leader was gone. The thunder had ceased. The fear began to fade, replaced by a familiar anxiety. The trauma of their past, the deep-seated need for something tangible, something visible to worship, began to re-emerge. The God on the mountain was invisible, silent, and distant. Their old slave mentality, which craved a God they could see and control, began to assert itself. They gathered around Aaron, the brother of Moses, the high priest in waiting. "Come, make us gods who will go before us." they demanded. "As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." In a moment of catastrophic weakness and fear, Aaron, the man who had stood with Moses before Pharaoh, caved to the pressure. He told them to bring their golden earrings, the very gold they had received from the Egyptians as they fled. He melted it down and fashioned it into the image of a bull calf. Why a calf? This was not a random choice. It was a direct import from Egypt. The Apis bull was one of Egypt's most powerful deities, a symbol of strength and fertility. In their fear and impatience, they did not just create an idol. They reverted. They rejected the invisible, transcendent God who had just revealed himself in fire and brought them out of slavery. And they opted for a cheap, golden imitation of the gods of their oppressors. It was a complete betrayal, an act of spiritual adultery committed at the very foot of the mountain where they had just made their wedding vows. Aaron built an altar before it, and they declared, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Then they held a festival. They bowed down, they offered sacrifices, and they indulged in revelry. It was a full-throated rejection of the covenant they had made just weeks before. Up on the mountain, God knew. His wrath burned. "Go down," he told Moses, "because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." In that moment, the entire future of Israel hung in the balance. God was ready to wipe them out and start over with Moses. But Moses, the mediator, stood in the gap. He pleaded for the people. His intercession is one of the most powerful prayers in all of Scripture. He did not argue that the people were innocent. He knew they were guilty. Instead, he appealed to God's own character and his reputation. "Lord," he cried, "why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, 'It was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth?'" He reminded God of his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He effectively put God's own glory on the line. He appealed not to God's justice, which the people rightly deserved, but to his mercy and his covenant-keeping faithfulness. And the scripture says, "Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened." Moses descended the mountain, the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. As he approached the camp, he heard the sound of singing and saw the people dancing before their golden idol. His anger burned. He threw the tablets to the ground, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. This was not just a fit of rage, it was a profoundly symbolic act. The covenant, written in stone by God, was now broken in stone by his mediator, because the people had already shattered it in their hearts. The broken law lay at the foot of a broken nation. The aftermath was terrible. Moses burned the calf, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it, forcing them to ingest the very substance of their sin. He called for those who were loyal to the Lord to stand with him. The tribe of Levi rallied to his side, and in a brutal act of judgment, they went through the camp and put to death about 3,000 men who were the ringleaders of the rebellion. The day that should have been a celebration of their covenant became a day of mourning and death. The seriousness of their sin demanded a serious consequence. The relationship was broken. God told Moses that he would not go with them personally to the promised land. "I will not go with you," he said, "because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way." His holiness was too great, and their sin was too persistent. The thought of God's absence was more terrifying to Moses than any enemy. He knew that the promised land without God's presence was just an empty piece of real estate. The entire point of their journey was not a destination, but a relationship with the God who was leading them. So Moses interceded again, this time with a boldness that is simply astonishing. "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here," he declared. What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? And God, moved by this tenacious love for his presence, relented once more. My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. It was in this context of brokenness, judgment, and restored fellowship that Moses made his most audacious request. He had seen God's power, he had heard his voice, he had received his law, but now he wanted more. He wanted to know the God of the law. He prayed, "Now show me your glory." He wanted to see past the fire and the smoke, to the very essence of God's character. God's response was one of the most profound moments of self-revelation in the Bible. He told Moses, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence." But he also said, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." The full unveiled glory of God is too much for mortal man. So, in an act of incredible tenderness, God placed Moses in a cleft of a rock, covering him with his hand as his glory passed by. And as he passed, God proclaimed his name, which was a declaration of his character, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. This was the ultimate revelation of Sinai. The glory of God was not primarily in his terrifying power, but in his merciful character. He is just, yes, but he is overwhelmingly compassionate, gracious, and loving. Hidden safely in the rock, Moses learned that the God of the law is fundamentally a God of grace. God then commanded Moses to chisel out 2 new stone tablets like the first ones and to come back up the mountain. The covenant was to be renewed. This time, however, it would be renewed not on the basis of the people's flawed promise to obey, but on the foundation of God's revealed character of grace and forgiveness. The law remained, the standard was not lowered, but the hope for the relationship now rested securely on God's mercy, not man's performance. When Moses came down from the mountain after this second encounter, with the new tablets in his hands, his face was radiant. It was shining with a reflected glory from having been in the presence of God. The people were afraid to come near him. The glory was so intense that he had to wear a veil over his face when he spoke to them. The mediator bore the physical evidence of his intimacy with the Holy One. And so, the story of Sinai comes to a close, not as an ending, but as a new beginning. It is a story that defines the human condition. We are given God's perfect law, a reflection of his holy character, and we, like Israel, break it before we even leave the mountain. Our hearts, like theirs, are prone to wander, to build golden calves of security, wealth, and self-worship. The law, in its perfection, serves not only as a guide but as a mirror, showing us our own inability to live up to its standards. It reveals our desperate need for a mediator, for someone to stand in the gap. It exposes our need for grace. Sinai is the story of a holy God making a way to dwell among a sinful people. The law, the covenant, the sacrificial system, and the instructions for the tabernacle that followed were all part of this grand project. They were a temporary measure, a shadow pointing forward to a greater reality. The shattered tablets pointed to a broken humanity in need of a savior. The mediating role of Moses pointed to a greater mediator who would not just speak for the people, but die for them. The cleft in the rock, where Moses was hidden from a glory that would have killed him, points to our only place of safety, hidden in Christ, the rock of our salvation. The glory that was revealed as God's mercy and grace finds its ultimate expression not on a mountain in the desert, but on a hill called Calvary. So, when you think of Sinai, don't just see the stone tablets. See the trembling mountain, the terrified people, and the God who, in both terrifying holiness and breathtaking love, came down. See the story of our own failure and God's relentless, covenant-keeping grace. Now, I have to ask you, Where do you see the pattern of Sinai in your own life? We all have moments where we promise God, everything you have said, we will do, only to find ourselves, moments later, dancing around a golden calf of our own making. What are the idols we turn to when God seems silent or distant? Leave your thoughts in the comment box below. This story from thousands of years ago is still our story today. If this journey to the trembling mountain has deepened your understanding of God's law, His holiness, and His incredible grace, give this a thumbs up and share it with others. It helps more people discover these timeless truths. And if you're ready to continue exploring the bedrock stories of our faith, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The story is far from over.